Good day, Strategy Gamer. This is First Contact Gamer here with episode 1 of our Let's Play of War in the East 2. This is a Gary Grigsby game. For those who are unfamiliar with the series or genre, it is what many would call a rivet counter. It is difficult to find a strategy game that is more in-depth with historical accuracy than Gary Grigsby's series of games. War in the East 2 is a new release at the time of recording. It came out about 2 weeks ago, and prior to War in the East 2, there was War in the East 1, and Gary Grigsby's team also did a War in Russia back in, I think it was the 90s. So this is kind of their third take on the Eastern Theater in World War II. He also has War in the West, War in the Pacific, and a few other games. Today, though, we're focusing just on War in the East 2, and this is going to be episode 1 of our Let's Play series as the Russians in the scenario Stalingrad to Berlin. So this was kind of the tipping point in the war where the Soviets had managed to push back and resist the German advance as it got into the late fall of 1942. And one of the big things that happened in the Eastern Theater in World War II was the impact of weather. And there's the notorious winter implications of invading Russia, but another aspect to that also is the spring and fall muddy seasons that occur. It's not just the winter that the Germans had to deal with. It was also the logistics of all the roads turning to mud, and in the summers, incredibly hot summers in parts of Russia. So we're going to be doing the Stalingrad to Berlin campaign. I've yet to complete this campaign or really play more than a turn or two of it. I'm a big fan of Gary Grigsby's games, but I've never really become an expert on any of them. I have ambitions to do so, but I'm hoping with this Let's Play we can kind of learn together how to dive into this game. It has a 550-page manual, but I'm hoping that we can demonstrate an ability to go through and actually enjoy the game, enjoy the level of detail that it presents, without getting into the weeds of all the nitty-gritty mechanics, and learn some tips and tricks together. So we'll begin with the Stalingrad to Berlin campaign, and we'll load that up. And then in a moment here, it's going to ask us to create a folder to save this in. So we're going to call this Let's Play. Now it's loading the map, and right off the bat, we're taken right into the game. The interface is thus that you have your main map here in the center, and at the top you have all of your action bars. So you have map info, info screens, and admin. Admin is for things such as saving the game, exiting the game, etc. Info screens are really a demonstration of how detailed and in-depth this game gets. For example, you can look at weather, and each hex has modeled weather. So here you see there's light snow and all of this purple. And then here in the north is where that front is moving in, where you have light snow, but it's also in some areas clear. You can toggle as well to see, okay, well, how does this impact the road systems? So you can see that in Western Europe, most of the roads are just fine. In our theater of operations, there's some pretty poor roads and there's some average roads. So that's one of the complexities of this game that you have to deal with. Exiting this, you can also see various metrics. So we're going to be taking a look at this as the game goes along to see things such as, okay, how many manpower losses do we have each turn? Total men, where are we at? Total armored fighting vehicles. So you see that right now we have a huge advantage in armored fighting vehicles as the Soviets. In total aircraft, the Germans have an advantage. So it gets very detailed. The map also deals with the Eastern Theater, but there are these theater boxes that we'll get into maybe a little later where the game actually simulates actions in the Far East, the Transcaucasus, the Northern Front, and then Soviet reserves. And that's for the Soviets. For the Germans, they have things such as Western Europe, the Mediterranean, etc., where they have to keep and deploy forces to prevent the other Allied powers from making advances on their western front. So the info screens are very detailed, and you can get into the nitty-gritty. The map info is where we're going to spend a lot more of our time, because this allows us to toggle different things, such as with F or this key here, we can actually toggle what the fort or defensive level of that particular hex is. Each hex is 10 miles, so when we zoom out here, you can see just how detailed this is going to get. About each episode, we'll be doing 1 to 2 complete turns. And turns have 2 phases. They have a air planning phase, and then they also have a ground movement phase. And then in between there is also a logistics phase, where logistics actions are resolved. And you also have a Axis power air operation phase and ground operation phase. And each turn is going to last a week. So when we finish with this turn completely, we'll move forward to November 26. Other things we have up here, for example, the hotkey for T toggles units, so that way you can zoom in and we can see a little bit more detail of what's actually on this hex, right? So here we can see that there is a rail line, there's an airfield, and then you have some marsh terrain, it looks like, here to the right. So T toggles those units on and off. We also have this news events, which as important things are happening, you'll get these little pop-ups to read. A lot of them are just a little bit of lore and history of what's happening. So this gives a description of kind of the Eastern Front of World War II at the time of us starting this game. And really the summary of it for you is the Germans have been held at Stalingrad. Winter is now about to set in, and the Soviets see an opportunity perhaps to begin pushing back and to change their initiative as they make their way towards Berlin. Below each of these rows, we see that as we went map info admin, right, the top row changes. The second row of icons stays constant depending on the phase that you're in. So in air planning, we're going to have these icons here that dictate, do we want to do an air directive for our air units that is ground support, ground attack, strategic bombing, so we want to hit factories and the like, air recon, air superiority, naval. There's not too much naval interaction in this game. Be pretty upfront about that, so we're probably not going to see too much use there. And then F11, or this battle sites icon, lets us look at where have there been battles or engagements, whether it be between air units, ground units, or both. Over here we also have that we have toggled using an automated AI air system. The complexity of this game I can't stress enough, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to step into it by using some of the automated features in the beginning, and then perhaps as we move forward we will dive a little deeper into some of those mechanics and do some more min-max intervention as needed. There's also this AI depot management that's really going to manage a lot of the supply chain of your war efforts. We're also going to toggle that. We're going to allow the AI to manage our depots. That'll take just a moment to load. So with some basics of the interface now explained, let's dive into what we're actually going to do here in this campaign Let's Play series. So zooming out and looking at the map, you see we're zoomed all the way out here and we can't even get a view of the Caucasus region. So this is a very large map. We have our northern forces, our central, southern, and here is Stalingrad, by the way, for some geographical reference. And then down here we see where the Soviet forces had been pushed back out of the Crimea past Sevastopol, and they're now defending this Caucasus mountain region, which today are countries like modern-day Georgia, north of Turkey, etc. And when I consider kind of what our overall plan is going to be, and I don't know how well this is going to work, but we're going to give it a try, is I think in the south, a lot of these forces we're going to stay pretty static with. I don't think we're going to be too aggressive in pushing these westward. I think we're going to let them, for the most part, maintain their position, where today the 4th and the 5th Air Army HQs are. I think this will stay pretty static. What I'm thinking is that we have our south central region here make a push down to Rostov to see if we can cut off the Germans and then make our way south along the coast here to Odessa, which then will also cut off the Crimea. What I really don't want to try to do is I don't want to do an advance just strictly towards, with these southern forces, say, towards Sevastopol. I think what's going to be critical is as these forces move south, cutting off the bulk of the German forces from their supply and trying to create pockets of them. And hopefully, if we can put enough pressure here, it will also have the effect of the Germans taking forces here to reinforce themselves so as not to get cut off at Rostov. When we look at the center of the map, these areas around Kursk and such, I actually think much of this we're going to keep, again, static and a little defensive. I don't envision some strong push from, say, Tambov down to Kiev in a straight line. I don't know how effective that's going to be. So what we're going to try to do instead is to take our two armies that we have here on both sides of this pocket that the Germans have created. We're going to see if we can't cut off by both forces reaching Smolensk and then hopefully surrounding much of the forces that currently are creating this pocket. And this really is a good geographical representation of kind of one of the areas in which the German advance is stalled. Right? There's a huge concentration of forces of here, but they just weren't able to make it much faster. And if we go just a little bit more to the east and west, we see that geographically for scale, right, they weren't that far from Moscow, and that's what that push was kind of intended to do. So I think if we can hold them here and try to use our forces to cut off via Smolensk, that will be pretty ideal. When we look up here in the north, we have Leningrad sitting up here, and it's difficult to see because of all of these air icons, but we're going to just leave them for now. Here you have Leningrad, and Leningrad was just such a horrible situation in real life for the Soviets, as the city was besieged for years and starvation ensued. We'll do our best to try to make a cut here with these forces over to the Gulf of Finland, heading west, and to try to capture some of these forces, but we're not going to do a straight shoot from north to south. I don't know that that'll be effective because I'm thinking they'll be pretty prepared. I'm hopeful that here, by this lake, which is Lake Elman, we can kind of make a cut through the south, crossing the river, and then making ourselves all the way over here to Narva. What's important to remember, too, is not just the geography of these decisions we're making, but also the logistics. You see here the different supply lines, and that's just the rail damage. One of these gives us a better view of the rails. Let's see which one that is. No, it's not the logistics. Anyways, these rail lines here, when we can cut these off, the amount of supplies that these forces will receive will be greatly diminished, and to a point, it'll pretty much be limited to their ability to get reinforcements through air supply, which is something similar that happened historically as the Germans were surrounded at Stalingrad. It is pretty much the only supplies that force could receive are via air supply. So there's a lot of routes that are going north to south here that we'll have to cut off to surround those forces. Whereas when we look at that German pocket that was pushing towards Moscow, it's going to be a little easier because when we look at the detail here, we just have to cut off these two rail lines. So theoretically, even if our forces here couldn't go south to Smolensk, we can severely hamper their resupply opportunity just by taking this intersection of rail and this intersection right here at Smolensk. And there's also a road here that primarily goes up. So with that, we're in the air planning phase, and I think we can start making some decisions and actions. Like I said, we're going to use a lot of the automated mechanics where possible and try to ease ourselves into it. I have made attempts with past Gary Grigsby games to say, okay, I'm going to read the manual and I'll have a good understanding and I'll get into it. And what's happened is I'll get 50, 60, 100 pages into the manual and then go, boy, this is feeling complicated, when really maybe what I should have done is just get in and try playing. And I did that with War in the West, and it felt pretty good and natural. So we're going to try it here as the same with War in the East too, where we're going to leverage automation from the AI where we have it available to us, and then learn a little bit as we go together. I did forget we get this turn summary at the beginning of each turn. There's not too much info here as it's first turn, but it's going to show us what our friendly losses were. Our order of battle changes. So this is saying for us, the Soviets, on-map forces, right, which is what it considers things we can directly control here on the map, what changed in terms of men, guns, armored fighting vehicles, and aircraft. Negative or positive values, right? If we got more from production than we lost, negative if we lost more than we produced and were resupplied, etc. TB stands for theater boxes. What are the changes in our theater boxes? And then which were transferred in. And then axis total just gives you a raw number of plus or negative, what their numbers were for each of these. Logistics, it gives us a little bit of a summary here in terms of tons received, men received, fuel received. And then this is a very nice summary of combat unit alerts. And this is going to be very good for us to gauge, okay, what percent of our units are under strength or in low supply, etc. So we can get some pretty in-depth understanding of how our forces are doing. And then down here we have a kind of victory point and totals tracker of how we're progressing. And then this is the victory screen that lets us see in a little bit more detail exactly how many victory points each of these assets are worth. So let's get into it now with the air campaign. So given that overall strategy that we were talking about, what we're going to do is go through our air units, and we're not necessarily going to assign each and every plane and each and every pilot, by the way. This game goes down to a pilot's name, and tell them what they're going to do. Instead, what we're going to do is give some general air directives, very high-level asks of the AI to do things, and then we're also going to set some priorities. So we're going to start with this 13th Air Army, and now we see over here on the right this unit bar, and we see some details about those units that belong to the 13th Air Army. And then here we have some high-level decisions that we can make. And I suggest that if you're just getting into this, you follow a similar path of start with these types of decisions and then you work your way into some of the more detail of the game. So this is saying it's only going to run missions during the day. Mixed replace is kind of an indication of what type of reinforcements are they getting. And that's okay as is. Asset priority and supply priority. So there's a priority scale 1 through 4. Or 0 through 4, excuse me, that says, okay, given all the other forces and their own priority settings, what are the chances the 13th Air Army gets what it needs in terms of a ratio of the supplies available or assets available, such as aircraft? Now, this 13th Air Army, as we were just talking about, we're not going to make a straight shot north to south here. So this is one of the air armies that I care a lot less about. So we're going to change both the asset and the supply priority to 1. This, where it says hold, is kind of the stance or posture of these units. So hold means that they're going to stay in their current air bases and airfields, regardless of where the front moves. Flexible means they may move forward, they may move back from the front line, depending how the front line is adjusting. Retreat will always move those air assets and the forces to the rears from the front line, and advance means it's going to keep up with the front line. So if we were expecting us to go north to south, right, with these ground forces, we would probably set it to advance, so then the 13th Air Army follows progressively along with us. We're going to keep it on hold because we don't imagine there's going to be too much change there. By clicking out, we now get back all of our options for the different air armies. Going to go the 14th Air Army. We're going to do very similar here, low and low. Yes, we are going to cut from east to west here, south of Leningrad, but it's not going to be one of our top priorities in terms of missions here. And flexible, we're going to set that to hold as well. Now we get to the 6th Air Army. And this one we're going to set just to a medium, because I think that we could see ourselves, and the 6th Air Army, by the way, I think is going to be supporting here by Novgorod, that little area I was saying that I hope we can cut south across. We're going to set those just a little higher than the northern 2 air armies that we had. And then we're going to have this on hold as well. We'll change that if we start making good progress there. 3rd Air Army is really kind of in its own pocket, inverted to what the Germans created here moving towards Moscow. So we're going to change their priority to very high for both assets and supply. And we're going to keep it on flexible because we don't yet know if we're going to be getting pressure in one direction or another. And everything else is good there. By the way, these 2 numbers, so 380 is the aircraft that that Air Army currently has. 478 represents kind of what a fully reinforced number would be of aircraft. So they're pretty underforced right now. 1st Air Army, again, we're going to keep it 4 and 4 because we're going to try to close off this pocket by making cuts into Smolensk. 15th Air Army, we're going to put this as low and low because, again, here in the center, I don't imagine us making direct pushes with too much effort. If we have opportunities to do so, we will, but otherwise we're not going to be too aggressive there. Okay, keep that on hold as well. 17th Air Army is the same. But where we are going to make a big push here is with these forces that are supported by the 16th and 8th Air Army, is we're going to make that push from the Stalingrad area down to Rostov. So here we're going to change this to 4, keep it on advanced, that's fine. Same thing, 4, 4 in advance. So those are all good. Go down here to the 4th Air Army. And just like I was saying here, in the south of the theater, we're not going to be making any big pushes. If there's an opportunity to do so, we will. But it's not a focus of the campaign. Okay, so now we've kind of got the prioritization of supplies and reinforcements for our various air armies. That's not something we're going to have to update or go through on a regular basis. But now what we want to do is we want to go through and start setting some specific air missions. And again, we're not going to get too granular with which aircraft are we using, what time of day are we striking, all of those things that this game does let you do. But we're going to set some general air directives. And we're going to hit T to bring back all of our unit chips. So let's start with the 1st Air Army here. So we got the 1st Air Army selected. And remember, we want to try to make a push from this area into Smolensk. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's do a ground attack. And says left click on map to select target hex. So looking through here, the 2 numbers on the bottom of these chips, what they represent, right? The first represents their attack value. If there is an equal signs, the second number represents the defensive value, and these are combat values. The game does a very good job of aggregating the strength of various units and divisions to just what's called a combat value. So this has a combat value of 12 when attacking, and right now it has a combat value of 60 when defending in this position. You'll see that our forces have a 3, which is the attacking combat value, but then instead of an equal signs, they have a dash or hyphen. So this is going to say this is how many movement points exist for that unit. So movement points are depleted as you move around the map. And much like with other games, if you're moving through forest, right, it takes more movement points than, say, if you were moving on a railroad. So that's what those 2 numbers represent when there's not an equal sign. But anyways, I think we're going to look for some opportunities here to cut behind their lines and try to make a push for Smolensk. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to go as south as I would like to and hit, for example, these motorized divisions. we're going to see if it will let us. We're going to left click on a map, and I'm going to click kind of somewhere central here. So we're just going to choose that hex right there. And then what we're going to do is it now gives us all these other options. And this is how detailed this game gets, right? And it says area. And we're going to change this to be 3. And what we now see is this grid where these green boxes, these green hexes, is the area in which is 3 hexes in circumference around this hex, that this air mission is going to be for. So they could do ground attacks on this unit all the way up through their line. Where you see purple here, this means that if we have ground attack support or bombers, if they make it out to these hexes, they are out of range of your fighter escorts that you may be using. So if we did try to hit anything out here, there would be no fighter escorts. Schedule, it's going to default pick which days to run. So it looks like it's running on day 2, day 5. And I'm going to add in as well day 6. For priorities, we're going to say unit priorities are high, interdiction priorities are low. Honestly, I don't know how effective this is going to be. This is part of that I'm learning with you guys to see how this goes. Altitude and priority, we're not going to change too much. You can adjust these altitude values, and this is something we'll explore much more later on, where we'll identify that different flak, different defenses, etc. are more defensive at certain altitudes, right? So as you increase altitude, you may be a little safer, but you may also be a little more inaccurate in either spotting, recon, or attacking your opponents. You can also set what the minimum and required number of planes for this action are, but we're going to let the computer decide that. When it says 0, that means auto. Everything else here looks pretty good. We're not going to get too particular about which units within the first air army are going to be doing this ground attack mission. And you can see all the detail, right? The IL-2Ms, the Yak-1Bs, the Yak-7Bs, etc. The hardware in this game and its description is quite incredible. We may look at it later, but there's actually a wiki where every unit in the game has a wiki entry with a little bit of history. But now that we've got these settings done, we're going to hit confirm. We're going to click yes. So now we have ground support missions and ground attack missions. The ground support mission was dictated because we currently have the AI directive just on automated. So it already created that for us. What we're also going to do is we don't want to do that. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to zoom back out. We're going to do something similar here with the 3rd Air Army, where we're going to do a ground attack. And again, looking at it, I want to try to hit their panzer divisions where I can, because knocking out armored fighting vehicles is going to be, one, I think a little bit easier of a target for our air missions, but I also think it's going to help them from being able to break through any of these lines to get resupply. So we're going to set units to high again, interdiction to low. This is already defaulted to more days with the operation running than normal, which is good. I'm actually going to take off one of them because I think that might be too many. And we're going to do our area again to 3. We're going to do a little bit less because I don't want us to go that far north, but we do want to try to hit these 2 panzer divisions that we know are here. And we'll hit confirm. So now it has both air directives selected. It's worth pointing out that some of these, right, we don't even see what it is that they may have in these divisions. We know there's a force there, but we don't know what it is. You can toggle in your game settings for this fog of war on and off. Doing all of this without fog of war on just feels very wrong to me, so we are going to play with fog of war on. So we've done some particular missions we want to happen in this pocket that was driving to Moscow. Now we're going to go down to Stalingrad, and I think we're going to do something similar again. So here we see we have Panzer Division, Motorized Division, Motorized Division. So I think there's going to be some opportunity to target some armored fighting vehicles. So we're going to take the 8th Air Army, and we're going to do another ground attack mission. We're going to set this to happen right here with an area of 2. We're going to go units high, interdiction low. There is great value to running interdiction mission on the ground forces. However, this is where we're starting to take the initiative in November of 1942. The German advance is slowing, so I don't know that there's as much value in necessarily reducing their ability to be maneuverable as there is to start hitting some of their hardware. We'll see if I'm proved wrong on that, but I'd assume that in the spring, when, not even the spring, frankly, the summer, when roads are in better condition, there's not mud, there's not blizzards, that's when interdiction missions might be much more important. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit confirm. We're not going to go through and do a ton of missions like this on all of our air armies for 2 reasons. One, being the first turn, I think we kind of need to get a little bit of a feel for the land, see how things are going. And second, I want to test some of these strategies that we're trying to come up with. With that said, for the sake of time, I think we might actually just click end the air planning phase and see what happens. So as we do this, we're going to get a little dialogue that will show us, we'll execute our air directives, that'll show us the sorties that are being run and how many losses we're taking. So already, boy, 19 losses right off the bat out of 383 sorties. That number keeps climbing. Boy, I'm hoping we're taking out some panzers as we do that. So it looks like 54 of the losses from flak and 64 are operational losses. All right. Almost none from air combat, so I'm assuming then that the Germans aren't flying too many missions. Our operational losses seem very, very high, and I'm wondering if perhaps I did not take into account the weather effects we have going on right now, because I do remember that when we looked at that weather screen, it looked like there was snow in these areas that we're currently operating in, so we may have lost many more units than necessary due to that oversight. So this has a bit of a summary of the different air armies and what exactly the air units were doing. And we see the weather was very poor. Yeah, so I'm betting weather had something to do with this. But it does look like we may have had some success. It doesn't look like we took out any armored fighting vehicles, but we may have taken out some guns there, so that's good. Let's see what the first air army got. Okay, 1 tank. Not necessarily a tank, it doesn't have to be a tank, but all right. So now we're currently in our ground phase. So you see this top bar has changed ever so slightly. We now have these icons instead of the air directive icons. And F11, or the show battle sites, this is showing us everywhere that we had some type of engagement from the last phase or last turn, etc. If we were to click move mode, that then takes those off the interface. But we are going to take a look to see how effective some of this was. So what we can do is we can highlight over and get a bit of a summary here. So here we lost 4 bombers, but the Axis actually lost something here. So let's see what the Germans lost. So we'll hit show details, and it looks like they lost 3 guns, 34 men, and we lost 5 aircraft. So they lost a rifle squad, mortar, anti-tank gun, howitzer, anti-tank gun, 75. Alright. It's not a great trade for 5 aircraft, but it did have some type of effect. Here they lost more men. Were there any notable wins that we can kind of look at? Okay, well, let's look at this. So here, we successfully destroyed a Panzer III. That's nice. That's good. And then we also destroyed an armored car, a pioneer squad, a field gun, a 37mm anti-tank gun, and 3 vehicles. There are these vehicles that just kind of exist in the game for calculating logistics, supply, movement, etc. Because it's important to remember that you have trucks moving not only supplies but men. And as you can deteriorate the number of vehicles that they have, that is to your benefit. But we did lose 5 bomber aircraft and 1 fighter aircraft, so that's not ideal. I'm not necessarily sure that the losses we took in exchange for what we knocked out are at the end of the day going to be considered worth it when we review. Let's see if there were any other notable battle sites that we had. Yeah. So here, you have these filters too that you can take on. So here we destroyed a Panzer Mark IV and a Panzerjäger, which is, I believe, a tank destroyer variant. So that's excellent. And for guns, Pak 38 anti-tank 105. Okay. But boy, we suffered heavy losses on that one. Wow. 20 bombers destroyed. So air losses, we can see the breakdown here. So it looks like most of these were deflect, not operational, though. So that is interesting. So, wow. Okay. And we did get an air interdiction value of +2, which is then going to be a bit of a modifier as we do our ground combat phase. We're going to do just a little bit of ground combat here before we close out the episode. But I do want to get to demonstrate some of that, and then we'll come back with episode 2, and we'll make sure that we close out turn 1 and close out turn 2 as well. So, looking up here, there is not a whole lot of opportunity for us to have some type of breakthrough. Now, when we look here, we've got 30,000 men, but 20,000 of them are part of this fort. So they're not going to be the most mobile of forces that we can use. We do have this. Actually, this is an HQ unit, but it looks like there's some armored fighting vehicles there that may be usable. Yeah. So these are support units that are attached to that HQ. These support units, they're not really considered, the game doesn't consider them on map, right? So you're not going to necessarily see a little chip, right, that represents the 287th Separate Tank Battalion. But what we can do is we can actually take some of these and attach them to, for example, if we wanted to, the 71st Naval Rifle Brigade. We could attach that tank battalion to it. And again, getting into the details, right? So here's that tank battalion, 36 vehicles, 209 men. It's got 11 T-34s, 5 KV-1s. And KV-1s in 1942 are still very strong, and historically they were a tank that the Germans did not expect to face with such difficulty from the Soviets. And in honesty, it actually surprised them that they were more technically advanced with tanks like the KV-1. And they had great difficulty dealing with it. The problem was the Soviets just didn't have enough of them. So those are pretty powerful in this current time and year, because we haven't yet seen, say, the Panthers and the Tigers really make it in force to the battlefront. I think what we will do, though, is we'll start to move up some of these units. Are these all part of the same army? They are. That's good. So you see this color coding indicates the army that these units are part of. So what we wouldn't want to do is to take this unit and move it over here to fight on this side, because that's then fighting with a separate army, and there are going to be some hindrances to us in doing so. These two particular units don't have any movement points this turn, though. I'm hesitant. I don't want to wink in our reserves too much here, but I also want to get forces down to the south to help with our push west. So we are going to take this 11th Rifle Division. We're going to move it down here. so it's positioned just a little better. I would like to cut off these units, but a defensive value of 80, when you look at what we have here, I mean, these are just rifle divisions with no armor to help cut through that at all. So we're going to have to leave those be. You don't have any movement points on that. Or that. This is an HQ unit. Rifle divisions. Alright. Those have no movement points. What I think we will do is we're going to take the 225th Rifle Division. And we're going to hit out here at the Luftwaffe. Wow, that was pretty bad. Field Division. And you see that we have this attack value of 1.4 and 1.6. And it says hold shift for deliberate attacks. So you have hasty attacks and deliberate attacks. Hasty attacks are going to take up less of your movement points, whereas deliberate attacks, they're going to take more, but they're going to be a little stronger. So when we hold down the shift key, we see that our attack value goes to 2.8 from 1.4. And if you've got 2-to-1 odds on a battle, that's good. Ideally 3-to-1 for a win. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 165th Rifle Division. Oh, that doesn't have enough movement points to move down. And that's going to exhaust all of theirs. Okay. We'll see what we can do here. We're going to attack with the 225th Rifle Division, a deliberate attack on this field division. Let's see what happens. All right. And they retreat it. Good stuff. We're going to hit F11, and we'll look to see what happened in that battle. So top line summary, we lost no units. They lost 65, 1 gun, 1 tank. All about that. Is as much of their hardware as we can get out early, the better. Let's see. And they didn't necessarily lose it. It was a retreat. So it's not currently in the force, and it's not in that hex. We have to switch back to move mode. I'm not sure we want to move this down. So if we move down, we're leaving just 3,000 men and 140 guns here to defend. So I think we're actually going to just leave that be. Now in this pocket here, this is so enticing, right? Because we have just all of these German units that if we could just break through in one of these hexes, they would then be out of supply and surrounded. But I really don't know that it's going to be possible to do so, because if we take, you hold shift key to select multiple, if we hold shift to select all of these units and say, okay, if we attack there, our attack value is 35 to 53. It's just not going to be high enough. There's a chance, but it's not a good chance. So let's see, is there anyone we can move in to help with that? So there's an artillery division that we're just going to move here regardless. This guards unit doesn't have enough points to move there. I think movement's very tough right now because of both the weather and the season that we're currently in. We could take that rifle brigade, but that's not going to make a huge difference on that line, to be honest. So I think we're not going to be able to make any progress there. So let's do this instead. What if we take these units here, 397th, 130th, and 391st Rifle Divisions. And what if we attacked there? It's not exactly even 2-to-1, but I'm wondering if we can get behind them a little, if that helps us. Let's give it a try. Alright, so they retreated. We took a little heavier losses than we saw with our last action. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to try to remember to click here so you guys can see where I'm going, but if I don't, just know I'm probably using these hotkeys that are identified. Let's see some of the details here. So, ground losses, let's first just look at armored fighting vehicles. 2 Stug 3s, a tank destroyer retreated. For guns, they lost 17 And looks like they're flat guns, mortars. Okay, that's some good stuff. Whereas we lost anti-tank guns, AA guns, some mortars, and some AA machine guns, which is a little interesting. They saw so much action there. We do see too that we had our air army and doing ground support for us. Is that air army still had that as a directive? So when they have that ground support in the air planning phase, it will actually carry over to assist your ground units as they're making combat. So that's why we had some air support here. And we look just at men. We see most of our losses here were with these rifle squads, but we lost some anti-tank rifle and mortar squads as well, which is a little disappointing. And we did lose some aircraft as well. So we lost some hardware too. But they've now evac'd that hex. We do not have enough movement points to get us in there. I don't know that any of these units will either. Yeah, it's going to be tough. Okay. I don't think we have enough to break through up here, so we're going to leave that be. Let's see if there's anything we can do in here. So these are just security forces. I'm betting... No? Oh, it's only a combat value of 2 with that one. That's not so good. Combat value of 1 is just 4,000 men. What if we took these two, though? No, not quite enough. I think we're going to have to hold our lines here, because we just don't have enough to make a meaningful push right now. Now here I'm tempted to try to cut off this one rail line that they do have. So I think we might try to do that, but what's this terrain that we're looking at? See, it's swamp. And that's why it's currently unoccupied right now, because it takes so many movement points to move into that. We're starting with 16. By the time we get here, we're left with only 2, which is very unfortunate. But what we could do is we can move here to then cut off that rail line north. Let's just see. Yep, so these divisions then can fill in that gap in the line. So we're going to move here. Oh, wonderful. We run into a panzer division. So we might need to expect a counterattack there. So what can we move up there to help defend against that panzer division? That only goes up to 4. None of them can make it all the way there. I should have been a little more cautious with that movement. Let's first see. Another note is a visual aid on these chips that we have. You see the top left of the icon, it has a color, green, orange, yellow, etc. That represents the supply situation of that particular unit. And then these cross swords represent kind of the combat value that they have left. So it could be that you've seen so much combat, so much movement, that this goes down to a 0, and effectively they're incapable of further action. 40% supply on fuel, 41% supply on supplies, no pun there, and 53% supply on ammunition. So these guys aren't doing so well. What we do have here, though, is a mechanized corps. And I'm wondering if it's worthwhile to bring that north to prevent that unit from just getting completely rolled over by the 8th Panzer Division. And I wish that I'd done some recon or something here to try to get a better idea of what the composition might be. So this is a tough call, because we could also use that mechanized corps to make a push into our lines here. Let's look to get an idea for the bigger picture again. I think it's more worthwhile, though, to cut off this rail line that's going north to south. So we're going to move it up here in support. Let's just see. Yeah, okay. So hopefully those 23,000 men, 160 armored fighting vehicles can hold off the 8th Panzer Division and anything that might come down south to help reinforce them. To try to prevent too many reinforcements, let's now see what we can do to move west and cut these guys off. So let's see, if we took all of these forces, can we break through where they're strongest here? That's going to be a big fight. That'd be the biggest fight that we have so far of the stream. I think instead it's going to be better if we go around them. So if we look at it, if we toggle using T, we see that this is actually Velkili-Luki, which is a bit of a crossroads, it seems, of logistics and supplies. I think it's going to be better if we can go around that city and to cut it off, as opposed to attacking them where they may have strongest in their defense. The question now is, are we able to do that with any effect here? Because we're crossing this river, and that makes it very difficult. Yeah, see, that's just not enough. I know I just preached for the reasons why we're not going to go there, but I think we have to. Or do we wait a turn? Because these are not in great supply. Can we make it across here? Yeah, we might be able to do that instead. So let's take these. Oh, we don't even need their support for that. Take the 21st Guards. We're going to do a deliberate attack there. Alright, so they retreated. Wow, we lost 5 tanks. Are you kidding me? Let's see. That's not good. Let's see what exactly they were. T-70s too. Okay. Well then. I kind of regret that now, because while we took out a lot of their men compared to what our losses were, we lost a lot of armor. Go back to move mode. I always forget to do that. We're going to move up then the 5th Guards to take the spot in the line. I wonder if now we can take these 2 units, add in them at 7-1. And they again retreated. More losses, though. More losses. Let's go take a look at what they were. This time we actually destroyed one of their Stug 3s instead of it just retreating. And here we lost 2 T-60s and a T-34. Lost some air assets as well. But breaking through their line is pretty important. What is very nice is this unit's gun assets have been cut in half effectively. And what I'm hoping that means is that it'll be a little easier now as we have ground support from our air, as they now have less flak to defend themselves with. That's another important consideration for us as we do all of this. So I think what we're going to do is end it here, everyone. What will happen is in episode 2, we'll resume turn 1, and we'll go through the rest of our ground action all the way to the south of the map. And then in episode 2, we will also try to wrap up turn 2. So just want to say thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll be putting out these videos at least once a week. And if you could like or subscribe, it'd be much appreciated. And if you have any specific questions to the game or curiosities that you have or we'd like to see in future episodes, please add a comment below and make sure to respond to that. Thanks, everyone. Have yourself a great day.